I'm Sierra, the founder of Good Juju. Welcome to Mindful Business Podcast, weekly discussions about mindfulness, entrepreneurship, and Web3. This live Twitter space is about an hour long. It is recorded and uploaded to YouTube to be played back anytime in podcast format. You can click the link in our bio to subscribe to our YouTube, where you can find previous episodes about moon rituals, mindfulness, yoga, and lots more. Welcome to episode 33, Business Strategies to Help You Thrive. Today we have a special guest, Lana Dingwall, an incredible entrepreneur, business coach, and fellow podcaster. I am super excited to dig in with Lana. I am also joined by my co-host, Abby, the lovely creator of Elevate, as usual, who I will now pass the mic to so she can say hello, and then we'll dive in with Lana.
Hello, Sierra. Hello, Lana. I am so excited for this conversation. I have brought my notebook and I am ready to take notes and dig in and just pick away so many nuggets of information tonight. So I love that we have a guest today. Happy April, happy spring, and hope you're doing well and excited to dig in. How are you, Sierra?
I'm doing good. I went to an afternoon yoga class, a hot yoga class, and then I had dinner with my husband, and now I'm kind of just shifting into my evening. So I'm also excited for this combo. Lana, I have had the pleasure of getting to know you first by being a guest on your podcast. So it's funny how things have come full circle. But also just being involved in Web3 and different NFT communities. You are such an incredible person and have so many things going on. So I'm going to pass the mic to you so you can properly introduce yourself and just kind of give everyone who doesn't know you a feel for some of the things you do and who you are.
Oh, thank you so much. And I'm very happy to be here. And that was a lovely intro segue into me talking a little bit more about myself. So hi everyone, my name is Lana. For those of you who I haven't met, as Sierra said, I'm a serial entrepreneur. So I like to dabble in all things. So obviously I love Web3 because Web3 is a lot about dabbling, different projects, DAO contributors, different communities to work in is an area that I feel very naturally drawn to. My background is in business coaching and consulting. I've been doing that full time for about 7, 8 years now, doing that on my own. And so I work a lot with small businesses, online businesses, creators, artists, and kind of even just based a little bit on what today's topic is. A lot of what I do is helping people create systems within their business that help them thrive, but not just from a work standpoint, also from a personal standpoint, helping them get more into alignment with who they are and how they do things. And with that, I obviously have an extensive background in marketing, sales, partnerships, growth. I'm the co-creator of Astrid Park. So it's an ecotourism business, which, we like to call it, it's an off-grid camper motel. And so we renovate and restore old camper vans, buses, and rent them out short term. I've been doing that for a couple of years, and we've recently integrated it into the world of Web3 with the launch of our Park Pass, because I'm all about experimenting with a lot of things. But in this case, it's really experimenting with how can you blur the lines of community, of, in our case, guests, the business itself, co-creation, ownership. So we've been doing that with the Park Pass, and contribute with Blue, which is an organization and a DAO that brings hackers to various hackathons and mentors them. And we have a 97% win rate, which is really exciting. And then I also dabble in poetry and philosophy, and have experimented with putting out some of my art as well on chain, as well as through other methods. So that's a little bit about me. And then not just also as a human, I'm all about that multi-dimensional, multifaceted life and really finding systems that work for us. I'm queer, and so I like to also talk about that because that's really the viewpoint of how I do things. I feel like queerness has given me this really beautiful permission from, although struggled with it, but a young age, to really already recognize that I don't necessarily fit into a preset mold. And that has really inspired the philosophies and course of how I live my life in terms of being, I feel blessed in being able to exist outside of norms and expectations. And so that has really followed me into my work life, and all the things that I do professionally as well.
Thank you so much for some background in that intro. I think what you're doing at Astrid Park is so cool. I know that you're a business coach. I know that you also are very interested in like spirituality and mindfulness. It's so interesting because Web3 in particular has connected me with like the most spiritually conscious entrepreneurs. It's so interesting. So before we get into like your tips and tricks on business strategies, I have to ask, how did you become interested in mindfulness and spirituality? And how does that factor into your work as a business coach?
Yeah, that is such a good question. I, Even for me, like when I use the term business coach, it's just like a title that I use that sort of maybe loosely describes to people what it is that I do. But like most of us, it's just a term. And so for me, in terms of like mindfulness and spirituality and how all of that has been integrated into my life, a lot of it just comes from, I feel my core values are curiosity, and presence, thriving, and I'm really an optimistic person, and so I've been interested for as long like as I can remember, around not only how do I as an individual create a life that's really rooted in joy and full expression, but also in turn, how can I, support others in doing so? And I feel that it's very hard to want to explore those things in a really real and genuine way and not stumble and or find yourself picking up mindfulness and spirituality as tools in your toolkit. I feel like they're very beautiful resources to have, communities to be a part of. And again, even just going back to queerness, I think that that also influences a lot of the mindfulness and spirituality components of just always asking big questions, looking at things from a philosophical standpoint, and really recognizing that just because something appears to be a certain way doesn't mean that that is how it is or it's the only truth. And so there's just also been this general curiosity of always questioning why, which again, I have found is very hard to do that and not find mindfulness and spirituality along the way, because they really are beautiful, not prerequisites, but they're very beautiful components of being able to live a conscious life that's rooted in what brings you joy and what thriving and happiness looks like for you as an individual human outside of the expectations of the world around you.
All right. I super appreciate that response. And I was just, I could honestly, I could go for days asking you a jillion questions, but let me get off my soapbox and allow Abby to chime in.
I'm really just enjoying listening to this conversation. I love listening to you talk about how it's just a part of what you do. I'd love to know more about the ecotourism business that you spoke about earlier. I'm sure that was part of what we're getting to, but I love that you are multi-passionate in your approach, and I think that's something that certainly Sierra and I can both really relate to, and so it's great to have you here and just to hear more about your point of view and your perspective. And I'd love to know again more about the ecotourism and kind of what led to that. And the last thing I'll say before I turn it over is just hearing you speak of what brings you joy and kind of what brings you into that state of flow in the moment, and how that's what kind of guides you into these different things. And that is something that just really is resonating with me right now and in this season of my life. And so I'm really excited just to vibe with you today.
Ah, thank you. Well, even your ending comment there about like setting up systems that allow us to thrive and be really happy as humans, that is in part actually what kind of ushered me into the space of Ashford Park and the ecotourism business. So I co-created it or co-founded it with my friend and business partner, Jackie, who is also a serial entrepreneur. Her resume is honestly like, my resume is so boring and like a wet blanket in comparison to hers, the things that she's done. And she's just such a badass human, badass entrepreneur. And so for both of us, Astrid was essentially this desire to express ourselves creatively in a different way. So much of entrepreneurship is about creation. We use the term, it's business building. And, in certain worlds and realms, it is business building. That creation is business building. And we are two people who love to build businesses, because we like making money. We like the forms of expression. We like challenges, trying out new things. And so for us, Astrid Park was a way for us to kind of work in a different way. For me, coaching is largely a cognitive venture. I use my brain all the time, whether it be working with clients, whether it be helping them create like marketing strategies, whether it be uh, running workshops, creating my own content. Everything was so my brain. And I bought and renovated a house with my brothers during COVID as like everyone picked a COVID project. That was mine, and my brothers were like, let's buy a house together and renovate it. And through that, I really learned how much I also love building physically. I like the labor intensive aspects of it. I like the challenge of having to do things with my hands and going to YouTube and figuring out how to do things. And I really loved that ability, much like coaching, to take something that might seem kind of messy and or uncertain and bring it to a place where you can really see the whole picture, and that, there was beauty there all along. It just maybe needed to be repainted or refinished or remodeled in certain ways. And so for me, that's like what made me want to move into Ashford Park. And then obviously the opportunity to work with Jackie, my business partner, who I had been friends with for a long time, was something I couldn't say no to. And she had actually bought, before COVID, but she had bought a bus and totally renovated it herself, like head to toe, took the seats out, everything, and turned it into a beauty bar, because one of her businesses, she has like a makeup line, and she also does like runs a hair and makeup bridal business in our area, and she's very successful in that. Also is like a full-time marketer. And so she was kind of had created Billy, so turned her bus into a beauty bar, and I had really admired her through that process, thought it was really cool, and we kind of were looking at, again, business models and setting up models that allow you to thrive but still express yourself in certain ways. And we kind of realized that short-term accommodations was a really cool and fun way to create a business that long term, definitely not in the interim when you're building it, but long term has the ability to create more passive income, which obviously allows you to thrive more. It's a way for us to like renovate and restore and give new life to things that maybe others consider junk and would just kind of rot away in a junkyard, and or a person might just ditch. And then it also allowed for us, because our current model, we are like playing with all models where like we might not be fully off grid, but sustainability is at our core. It was also just a way for us to experiment with providing cool experiences. We both love traveling. So it was just a way for us to blend all of these various aspects of ourselves into a project. And then a project that obviously is also set up for the long term. Again, not in the interim, but you guys already know that. Anyone who starts a business, you know that in the short term, it's a lot of work, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. But long term kind of is, again, setting us up for a certain kind of life and or business that we can automate, so that we're able to then find a new project. We're both manifesting generators, for anyone that is into human design. So multiple projects are in our nature. And so part of how we thrive is creating businesses that allow us more time and space and energy to create more businesses and or just do more projects.
Oh my God, I'm a manifesting generator too. And like when you said that, I was like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. Like, because I remember when we first connected and you telling me about all the different things you were doing. And typically, like when I tell someone about all the things I'm doing, they're like, whoa, that's a lot. And I remember meeting you and thinking, whoa, this person is just as nuts as I am. But turns out you're just a manifesting generator. Which does mean
Exactly.
you're just as nuts as me.
We're just wired the same way.
Oh my goodness. That is incredible. And, Good Juju is born from this desire to make money while doing something that I really love and enjoy, that just brings me so much peace and so much fulfillment. So I can totally relate to that. And I'm sure Abby can as well, in terms of her, journey with yoga and Elevate. I'll let you speak for yourself, Abby, but I'm totally resonating.
I'm resonating as well. And people keep bringing up human design. And I don't know what the fuck I am yet, because I have yet to follow the links and do the thing. But I'm curious to know. And as it's funny, because as Lana was speaking, I was thinking, gosh, you sound a lot like my amazing friend Sierra over here that has so many cool things going on all the time. So no, I really do really do resonate with what you're saying. And yes, I'm over here now wanting to go down some human design rabbit holes. But thank you for sharing your story of what took you to that. I also, yes, I'm 24 years as an entrepreneur in the wellness industry. I've been working my entire adult life to do exactly what you said, to really feel fulfilled in what I'm doing, but to be able to keep doing more things like this that really like expand your soul, that yeah, not just pay the bills, but create a life that you really love, that feels like yeah, that feels like it's fueling your passion. And there's this just beautiful circle that goes with doing this, right? Like you said, you're setting up for the long term, you're planting seeds now. It's really, cultivating the long vision of your life. And so I personally am also serial entrepreneur, and love hearing your story, and hearing your passion, because yes, I think the three of us could take a trip together and talk at length about this. So tell us more about what else you have going on and what you brought to the table to talk about today. I know we have been barreling you with questions, but I know you probably came with a plan, and I'd love to hear it because I've got my notebook ready.
No, I welcome all questions, because and then I can just always tie them back to the theme. Uh, but yeah, and just like other things that I do, not everything's business either. I like to write poetry, do meditation. I've experimented with creating some NFTs for I can say NFT here, but in the normie world, I might say like digital collectibles and or just like releasing my art. And so I think too with all forms of creation, and really again the theme of today, it's business strategies that help you thrive, and mindful business. It's really honoring all of the parts of you, recognizing that we also have different seasons. I find, I don't know what it is about fall, but fall, it's just like I can write so much poetry in the fall, or write so many like beautiful reflective pieces, and then other seasons that's not the energy that I'm in. So part of thriving is also just recognizing that we are seasonal and cyclical humans and beings, and our energy flows in various ways. And so if you are someone who has a lot of different projects, even just getting curious around, oh, what seasons do I seemingly have? And they don't have to correlate with actual seasons, but what seasons do I seem to have more time or energy for, and kind of setting up some systems around that. Because just because you have a lot of things on the go doesn't mean you have to do them all at the same time. But on the topic of business strategies that help you thrive, and this is something I do a lot with clients that I've worked with over the years, and then obviously my own philosophy, is that we're not actually all created equal. Like in terms of humanity and human rights, we are equal and fundamentally deserve equality in that regard. But when it comes to our structure and makeup that make us who we are, and how we think and how we approach the world and how we view the world and how we create in it, we are absolutely not the same, even when we might seemingly appear to be. And even as an example, like with being a manifesting generator and my business partner being a manifesting generator, the intricacies of what is flow states for us and what isn't are different. And so one of the areas I find people get stuck in is we love to really look up to our idols and the people that we admire. And those things are important. We need to find people who we admire and inspire us to want to build something or think outside the box. And then, even just as an example, because Sierra is also a Deadfella, Betty from Deadfellas is someone that I really, really admire so much. And Psych. I love what they're doing as a brand. And so I really admire Betty, but I can also tell from how she does things and how she works that our like creation, like how we create, how we operate is really different. And if I confused my admiration for her as needing to copy how I think she does things, I'd probably be setting myself up for failure, and also setting myself up to like mindset and mentally, like emotionally, feel less than or inferior because I'm not able to quote unquote keep up with this person that I think is really successful. And so part of being able to thrive is really just understanding who you are and how you operate. And even just like a simple exercise can be thinking about tasks that we do in our businesses or tasks that we do in our lives, and simply asking ourselves, when I do that, does it take energy from me? So do I feel depleted after I do it? When I do it, do I feel neutral? So it's something that I can do and it doesn't really give me energy, but it doesn't take energy. And then third is, are there tasks that when I do it, they actually seemingly give me energy? And that's like just obviously a very simplified kind of strategy and tactic, but even just questioning how our energy feels when we approach something and when we complete something can give us a lot of insight into what our path of least resistance is. And our path of least resistance is essentially our main driving force in if we're going to be able to create systems of flow. Now, obviously, there's always things you're going to have to do that you don't want to do, but a lot of it, when we think about creating a business where you thrive and creating a life where you thrive, it's about recognizing, how can I create more flow in my life, because you ironically get more done, but in seemingly less time, because these are all tasks that give you energy, and so it compounds on itself. The more things you do that light you up and give you energy and really energize you, the more you're able to do those tasks, the further you're able to go in a way that doesn't exhaust you. Now, if you set up everything to be doing tasks and or doing things that are very depleting for you, burnout is going to occur a lot faster. And so it's just even like assessing when doing things. Is this for me? Is this not for me? Assessing, do I have to do this, or do I think I have to do this? What could be an alternative for me? An example would be like content creation. As entrepreneurs, you know that you need to create content, but not all forms of content creation are the same. I'm someone who like spaces like this podcast, and it's why I have a podcast, like why I do a lot of public speaking. Oral content creation for me is a energy giving activity. It doesn't deplete me. Like I could talk all day and physically I might be tired, but like mentally I'm so engaged, I'm so alive. It's like this electric feeling. Whereas if I had to sit at my computer and write all day, it would be a lot more draining, and it would take me way more time to like write a blog post, even if it was a short blog post, than it would for me to like pump out an hour-long podcast. I can pump out an hour-long podcast in an hour. If I needed to write a blog post, it might take me 3. And so that's just an example of like following my path of least resistance. Obviously, for someone like me, my main form of content should be audio based. I'm obviously going to need written content, but again, there's like ways that you can get creative with that. ChatGPT has been A++. Thank you, bud, for helping me with that. And then again, sound clips, sound bites, translating things I write. And then I also just love to write as well. But I know that blogging should not be my main form of content creation because it is the most energy exhausting. So that's just even like a small example. Um, does that make sense? I'm like, I love talking. It's also nighttime. So I hope my brain's okay.
I'm going to jump in and say it totally makes sense. And we've had similar conversations where we talk about, does this nourish me or does this deplete me? But I love thinking about it coming from this lens of strategizing your business and making decisions. You know, does this align with how does it feel inside that path of least resistance? It does make sense. And so I appreciate that. I just wanted to chime in. I'm sure you have input as well. Sorry, Sierra, to jump in there.
Never be sorry. Never be sorry. Yes, it is definitely all making sense. What really stood out to me was what you mentioned about like honoring the seasons that we all kind of cycle through as individuals. Yeah, for me, a lot of that also, as I've spoken about at length, is like the season of my menstrual cycle, and it's like literally you're going through all 4 seasons in your body physically as you make your way through a 28-day menstrual cycle, which I guess is not strange. It's just divine, divine alignment, and nature. But yeah, it just made me think of seasons. I know that there are seasons of my month where it's like, damn, this is a tired week. And like, maybe this isn't like the week I push myself for 2-a-day workouts or to cook, 5 home cooked meals this week on top of everything I have to do with my business. So I feel like understanding your seasons and the bandwidth that kind of comes with these different seasons is important because, like you said, sometimes you'll get a creative spark. And then sometimes it's a while before that spark comes again. But when you know your seasons, I guess you can kind of rest and relax into the fact that, like, that energy is coming back and it's not lost forever, right?
Exactly. And I think one of the things with people like us where we do a lot of projects, and there are people who and doing a lot of projects is also not for everyone. Like truly understanding your human design can just be helpful, and it's, if anything, these things are just meant to be validating, not to keep us stuck, but to validate us like, oh yeah, I am maybe wired a little bit differently. This is why I do this, because sometimes we do or do not do things because shame circles us. And so the validation of just knowing, oh yeah, like I'm not a quote unquote like singular career person, and there's no shame in that. And then if you are a singular career person, there's also no shame in that. Everything is just about making sure it makes sense for us. Uh, and so I think one of the other things too with thriving and experimentation is recognizing that as humans we change, and oftentimes, when we think back, and your music taste is always the best example about, you go through phases where you're like, this is especially when you're younger, you're like, this is the best band ever. Like, they're always going to be my favorite band. I'm obsessed with them. And then as you get older, you're like, oh my God, that is so embarrassing. Or your taste in music has changed. And what once used to be so important to you is no longer important to you. And I feel that as we get older, we really fail to recognize that we will still go through those cycles of really unbecoming and rebecoming, unbecoming and rebecoming. It's just because our lives can seemingly be more like static versus compared to when we're younger. There's a lot of change because you're just getting older at school, the way that things move. And so part of thriving is also just giving yourself the time and space of knowing that while you want to honor the fact that now is often the best time to do stuff, like if you've been thinking about something for a while, get out and try it, but also knowing that now might not be, again, the irony, on the flip side of that, it might not be the right time. And the saying, goes that we often overestimate what we can accomplish in a year, but we significantly underestimate what we can accomplish in 10. And so part of thriving, and both in business, but just in life, is giving ourselves time and space, and in recognizing that we don't have to do everything right now. We don't have to figure everything out right now. Oftentimes when building out businesses, there's a lot of trial and error. Where you start is not where you finish. And so being open to that experience of how you change, how your goals change, how what you're building changes, and not feeling like you have to be so tethered to how something started is really important. And then also just not being tethered to who you think you are. The reality is we are often, we've, and most people, like, especially listening to this Twitter space, the reality is that we've probably already become the future version of ourselves that our past self wanted to be in some way. Like, we already are the realization of some of our wildest dreams coming true, maybe in small ways, maybe in big ways. And so also reminding ourselves that if that is true now, like that can be true in the future as well. And so thinking outside of the box, thinking expansively in terms of like, what could our life look like? Because we do have more time than we realize, especially when we remove the time frame of like within the next year or two, and we give ourselves more space to create momentum and build structures. We're able to, like, in an expansive way, envision a bigger, more beautiful life for ourselves. And then also just recognizing that the reality is that you probably, again, your future self will become the version of you that your past self like wanted to be, if you're putting in like the steps and putting in some of the processes. So that's definitely also a strategy, a more mindful strategy, but it's also, yeah, just like trusting yourself, giving yourself more time and space, not putting so much pressure on yourself to have everything figured out right now. And just because something isn't true now doesn't mean that it won't be true in the future, because you already have probably a ton of examples of how that's already been true. Again, we often like look to the future with differently. Obviously, hindsight is 2020, but it's great to look actually like what you've already done, all the ways you've changed, all the things you've already accomplished, all the mountains you've already moved, to remind yourself of what could also be possible in the future as well, if you just kind of believe in the possibility of what could be.
That's really beautiful, and honestly, such a timely reminder. And you're right. We do have this tendency to forget to kind of give ourselves recognition of what we've done and accomplished. And I love what you're saying about giving ourselves time and space, taking that pressure off, having a guideline, but broadening that spectrum and that scope so that we're not boxing ourselves in, being more flexible, knowing ourselves, and being open to the change. As you said, it might not look the way you thought it was going to in the beginning, and being able to move along with those changes and give yourself grace. I really appreciate the things that you're saying, and it feels really really timely and inspirational.
I second that 100%. I think I'm big into systems. I'm like a super spreadsheety type of person, and I have my own systems in terms of how I keep myself on track and keep my own head on straight. And yeah, as you said, it's like we're all different. There's no wrong way, different strokes for different folks, as they say. Um, but I do feel like overall, like approaching your business strategy in a mindful way, mindful business, is important. And I do think that mindfulness can also be a way to help us develop successful business strategies. And I feel like that's kind of also what you're alluding to. And I feel like there are a lot of misconceptions about mindfulness and business. And that, like you have to be hard and you have to be tough and like you're not going to make any money and not going to be successful. You can't be soft. And I would love for you to talk a bit about that, because I feel like, thriving doesn't mean that you have to like be this super aggressive. You have to aggressively pursue your goals in order to thrive. That's not true. So I would love for you to speak on that a bit as well.
Yeah, of course. And that's such a great question and great prompt. So thank you. I feel, yeah, when we think about accomplishing our goals, going after our wildest dreams, building businesses, as you said, there's often this like strong masculine energy, this strong doing energy. And again, because this is like a spiritual, mindful based podcast, we also know that obviously the feminine is a huge and very important component of healthy masculine energy. And so it's no different in business as well. And the reality is I see this a lot. Like I have worked with thousands of people over the years of entrepreneurs, like men, women, non-binary people all over the world. And one of the most common things that I see, and it doesn't happen every time I work with a new client, but it happens more often than not, which is why they hire me and what they want to work on ends up significantly shifting throughout the course of our work together, not because I'm guiding them somewhere else, but because our work together highlights to them how so much of what they were doing was really based on what they thought they should be doing, or who they thought they should be, or how they thought they should structure their business. And the more that they really got to understand themselves and the real motivations behind their goals and behind why it was they're creating, there oftentimes was an inevitable shift in priorities, in goals, and in benchmarks that they were setting for themselves, because they realized that they were striving for something that like they felt was them needing to prove something, or they were striving for something based on like what they thought success looked like, not what it actually meant to them. And so a huge part of slowing down to speed up even, and being thoughtful in that approach, is always just checking in, like, does this make sense for me? Is this aligned with my values? Knowing that obviously that can shift and change. what is the core energy behind this? Am I doing this because I feel a need to prove myself, because I feel a lack of validation? And I think that achieving this thing, making a certain amount of money, landing a certain kind of client will all of a sudden validate me and my insecurities will disappear. Well, what we know, and I know from personal experience as well, is that it's like a carrot and a stick. It's never going to be enough. Every time you hit a goal, if that goal was really rooted in like seeking validation and or trying to compensate for some kind of insecurity, it's you accomplish that goal and now that goal is no longer good enough. You need to reach a new goal, and so we attach these carrot and sticks to ourselves, and we're never going to be able to get to what it is that we want, because our core motivation and our core drive is not rooted in something that's meant for us to thrive in. It's being kind of pushed through this feeling of like we're not enough, and you can't fill that sense of not being enough through accomplishment. And so I feel that when you kind of make that shift and you stop trying to build and be quote unquote successful from that place of like needing to prove your worthiness or your worth, and you shift it more into an alignment with yourself, like what makes me happy, what makes me energized, what makes me feel proud of myself, what makes me feel like I'm making a difference, again, whatever your values are. And money can be a component of that. Like what kind of money do I want to make because I want to have a certain kind of lifestyle? That's a lot different than like I want to have a certain kind of lifestyle because then people will think that I'm worthy, or then I'll feel good enough, because I feel like I've quote unquote like made it. So much of being able to slow down and not constantly be in this go, 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 push, 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 drive, drive, drive seat, um, is to just constantly, again, be checking like, am I going to the right destination? Is this the destination I want to be going to? Is this the vehicle I want to be driving in? Is this even me? And just the more that we kind of reflect, the easier it is for us to sometimes even go fast, but in a way that's like very meaningful. And so we're going fast, but it doesn't feel like you're pushing as hard. There's so much less resistance. It's like I always use the analogy, like building a business and just also just like living a happy life. But building a business is, no matter what, you're climbing up a mountain. Like that part is inevitable. You're climbing up the mountain no matter what. However, you get to decide, are you climbing up the mountain with like the least amount of resistance? So you've got a backpack full of all of your necessities and the things that you really need to help you thrive? Or are you climbing that mountain carrying a bunch of dead weight because you're bringing a bunch of things on your journey that are not necessary for you, but you're afraid that you will need? And so you've convinced yourself it's worth carrying all this extra weight up the mountain versus traveling light. And so that is definitely like a way to help with that, where it is just, again, it's rooted in mindfulness, self-reflection, understanding ourselves, and then aligning ourselves with our goals in a way that kind of makes sense for us.
As you were talking, I was thinking a little bit about law of attraction, about attracting rather than chasing. But when we're thinking about business and climbing that mountain, kind of finding that middle ground. So I'm glad that you brought it back to that as well. Like, yeah, you're still climbing the mountain, but there are ways to do this much more efficiently, right? And much more mindfully. So bringing it back to that. So yeah, take a look at that backpack and see what dead weight you are carrying up that mountain. I love that. I love that analogy.
I feel like sometimes it takes literally breaking your back with the heavy ass backpack to understand that like maybe it's time to take a few things out. And it's like sometimes at the end, by breaking your back, it's like reaching the point of burnout beyond return. And unfortunately, a lot of us don't see like the warning flag. We don't feel the backpack getting heavier slowly. We wait until it's buckling our knees to take things out of it. And I feel like it's also important to say, like, don't do that because you're only hurting yourself, and it's not impressive to other people that you can abuse yourself. So take it easy. And it's like, and I say this and I'm saying it like talking to myself, because I am someone who's filled the backpack and it's just like, well, what if I need this? Well, what if the weather is like this? Well, what if? And it's like, girl, you don't need it. And it has resulted in me kind of slowing myself down, getting myself distracted, getting myself wrapped and caught up in things that are so misaligned with what I set out to do. So I appreciate that analogy, and I love comparisons like that because I feel like the ability to visualize a scenario like in your mind's eye really, like, I don't know, it helps put the point across, and it helps you kind of resonate and kind of see yourself in that light as well. So thank you.
It does. I've got to jump in before you do, just for a quick second to say we have all been there, right? We experience teaches us. I think every one of us starts our first journey or first many, many, many journeys up that mountain, hauling ass more than we need in that backpack and dragging somebody else's backpack sometimes too. And you know what? I'm a helper and a nourishing person. I'm going to carry yours too for a while. And we overload and overwhelm ourselves until, you're right, life will humble us, the mountain will humble us, we'll fall down, we'll roll down I've rolled down the fucking mountain and just laid there for a minute. And so yes, it does. I think experience teaches us, but in conversations like this and surrounding ourselves with supportive networks of like-minded people that can look at us and say, hey friend, how about we look at that backpack together, so we have all been there.
Absolutely, we've all been there, and I think part of it is it's also why doesn't matter. You know, especially when you're like young, when you're adolescent, teenager, people tell you all the time how like time will teach you just so many things that you just can't know otherwise. And that this is just like one of those things where you essentially need to learn through going through the experience yourself. It's one of those things where advice doesn't mean anything until afterwards. And then you're like, oh, that's what they were talking about. And so it's always just important too to know that, yeah, if you're like going up the mountain and you, as you were saying, roll all the way back down, that's part of the process. Like that is part of the process. And you know, like another analogy that I love for perspective is just like how we view failure. You know, so often people will try something and it won't go the way that they want. And so they take that as failure. And failures is like, okay, well, I have to stop. Like, I gave it a shot. I gave it that one shot, maybe two shots, and I failed. So I have to pack it up and go home. And the reality is that we need to keep going. And so the analogy that I always give is like a basketball analogy because I love basketball. I was supposed to play after this Twitter space, but we're having like a crazy ice storm, so it got canceled. But basketball is like an analogy that I love. Most people obviously understand how to play basketball, but you know, if you walk into the court and take a shot and you miss, it's not a failure, it's a missed shot. If you lose the game, it's not a failure. You just lost the game because you're playing like in the season. If you lose the season, it's not a failure because you're playing in more seasons to come. So your team is strategizing, how can we set ourselves up for success next season? And so what we experience, and obviously sports is just a small analogy, is that there's no real failure. Like failure only exists when you like pack up and say you're never doing it ever again. And so the idea is with business and or any project that we're doing, and Web3 is full of so much trial and error. Like there are so many products that I see that get shipped that within 6 months have completely pivoted. Well, that's not a failure. That's actually them responding to the market and or feedback and or recognizing like, oh wait, I think that our product would better serve this industry, or this is more in alignment with our values. That's not a failure. That's a smart pivot. And so for us, we also need to recognize that as we're playing the game of life, there are seemingly going to be things that occur that really hurt us. You know, like I don't know if you've ever played basketball and you get like stuffed and you go to take a shot and someone just like swats it down right away. Like that hurts. Like that, you're like, oh my God, that was embarrassing. It's not fun, but you still keep playing. You still take more shots. And overarchingly, like as time moves on, that person that stuffed you, it doesn't hurt as much because and you just keep going. And it's the same thing. And part of thriving and part of mindfulness in what it is that we do is recognizing that there's a continuation. Just because something doesn't go according to plan doesn't mean that it's a stop, that now we have to like pack it up and turn around. It's just more like, okay, how do we respond to this? What do we learn from it? How can I pivot or change? And that pivot or change can be like closing up a business and or letting something go and moving on to something else. But that, again, that's not a failure, because in the longevity of your story, that'll be like a footnote where you're like, oh yeah, like when I think about the iterations of things that I've done in my business, it is hard. I like forget about things that at one point felt like they were just huge ego blows, where I was like, I don't know if I can continue. And now I barely remember them. I have like, the only reason I remember them is because I wrote it down in like like maybe in a blog post or an Instagram post or something, where I'm like, oh yeah, wait, I did do that huge fuck up. I totally forgot about that. Whereas at the time it was huge. And so there's also just like that compassion piece of giving yourself space to make mistakes, giving yourself space to pivot, giving yourself space to try new things, and recognizing that just like in basketball, you can shoot your shot and miss, but it's not a failure. It's only a failure if you like pack it up and walk off the court. And so, how can you view your life as an ever continuing game where there's so many opportunities for improvement, new experiences, and new opportunities to really succeed?
Deeply appreciate this so much. Having experienced what felt like a major failure in my IRL business in the last couple of years here, your brain will tell you that, right? Your brain will tell you, oh, you're starting from zero, and what a failure. And especially when you fall on your face in front of everyone. I love your parallel to the game, and that embarrassment that you feel, but it's just a thing, and you shake it off, and you know you're never starting from scratch when you've had that experience under your belt. And I've really had to take a step back and remember that, and understand that, no, I'm coming to the to rebuild with so much more than I ever had when I started 24 years ago or 17 years ago, whatever iteration, as you said. And so, yeah, it's just, shake it off. Good game, bad game, whatever. You come into the next experience really with so much more perspective, more experience, more to offer. And yeah, if you don't get yourself so tied up in what you feel like the success looks like, or should look like, and you stay in that state of flow and what feels good, you can keep moving forward, learning from those experiences and not getting so hung up on them. So really appreciate this really timely discussion. I'm just really digging this.
I am super digging this. I always jokingly tell people that entrepreneurs have failure kinks, because it's truly a part of the process. But I do love the optimistic twist that you put on this, because everything is a learning experience. And in I think it was our first episode of Mindful Business, I touched on, we went through my history and Abby's history, and I touched on kind of how my entrepreneurial journey started. And my first business was a vegan cosmetics line called Flora and Fauna, and we actually still have some of the product listed on Amazon. That's how much of the stuff that I bought, that like there is still a lot of it. The difficulty with cosmetics is things expire. Cosmetics are regulated by the FDA, and just like food products, cosmetics are required to have an expiration date. And legally, when that date passes, you shouldn't sell it. Some things are okay, like something like a fragrance or a perfume. It's alcohol based; it'll be okay. But a lot of a lot of things go bad. So whatever. I amassed a huge amount of product. I spent a ton of money because the minimum orders to, private label are high. And ultimately it didn't work out. And I ended up with a bunch of expired stuff that I had to just give or throw away. We actually do have now that I think about it, we have some of our rose deodorizing spray that's still on Amazon from forever ago. But because it's a room spray and not a body spray, it's safe and it's okay. But it didn't work out. I closed up shop. And I just mentioned that if anyone's interested in Googling it, like, this is real and it exists and you can definitely find it online. I closed up shop, and there was a period of time I felt like such a failure, especially because I had invested so much money. I had accumulated a good bit of debt in trying to buy the inventory and get it off the ground. And it just felt like a fail. I was like, damn, I don't have anything to show for this. But when Good Juju was born a few years later, I everything I learned from that experience became so instrumental in making this a success and doing things differently by drawing from so many learning experiences. So, and one of the big things I learned was just like, and what I love about my crystal store is just like, I don't have to buy 800 rose quartz as a minimum order to stock in my store. Like there are certain crystals, I legit have one of them. It is one of a kind. And that's the beauty of crystals. People like having something that is one of a kind and special. So I didn't have to overcommit myself. And that was a huge learning. So reframing difficult experiences is a business strategy and it's free. It's just a matter of shifting your perspective and your internal dialogue. So thank you for that reminder.
I am dying over uh how did you phrase the failure kink for small business owners? I'm dying.
I should put it on a shirt, actually. I should like get it big on a shirt. Entrepreneurs have a failure kink. Like we do.
We definitely do. If Jackie was here, my business partner from Ashford, she would be dying right now. It's so true. It's so true. And I think, the kink also just like makes it kind of fun, which is nice. Like, we want to find ways to have more compassion around quote unquote failure. And even with your example there, Sierra, it's like, as you said, you weren't starting over. And if we go back to the sports analogy, losing is actually a part of winning. Like sometimes, and more often than not, we actually learn more through the process of losing than we do winning. Because sometimes, especially in a sport component, if you're playing in a league that maybe you're not being challenged enough in, and then you get up put into a new league, you're in for like a rude awakening. And so there's also this level of, as long as we're bringing like an open eye, open heart, can't lose kind of like mentality to how we're viewing our failures, we are also opening ourselves up for crazy, crazy education. Like it is, there's so much learning in failing. Again, they're the toughest lessons, but they often are the best. And most people will admit, while they don't necessarily like want to relive a bad experience, they also more often than not would say, but I wouldn't change it because the failure X or this thing over here actually led me over here, which ended up being so much more beautiful. And I would have never gotten there if it wasn't for that. And so I think too, part of thriving and being mindful is recognizing that failure is not the enemy of success. Failure is like a part of the equation, and you got to have enough failures in your like equation to end up at the space of success that you want, because it is impossible. And we know that if a person were to tell us that they've never failed at anything, everyone would be like, bullshit. Like there would not be any part of that that would be believable. If a person's like, yeah, like I just always, everything I touch turns to gold. And I have a couple of friends that are like pretty close to everything I touch turns to gold, but I know enough from the back end of working with them and their stuff that that's actually not the case, even though it might publicly seem that way. And so it's also just important to recognize that just because you see a person's highlight reel, do not compare yourself to that. Everyone has failure, and oftentimes a long list of it on their road to success. Again, it's not the enemy of success. It's very much an important part of the equation. And so the more that we can find comfort, although very uncomfortable comfort, in them showing up and popping up, it's also recognizing, oh wait, in a way, this feels really catastrophic and it's overwhelming. But then there's also this piece of it where maybe this is actually leading me closer though to what I want or need, even if it doesn't feel that way in the moment.
As you're speaking, I'm really reminded of the analogy of, what it takes to create a diamond, right? It takes an incredible amount of pressure and heat to create this gem out of this hunk of something, right? The hunk of junk, right? And so I'm really inspired hearing you talk, and really appreciate that reminder that's really part of the process. And it's hard to see when you are in the mud. It's hard to see that lotus is going to grow from that later, when you're in it. But the only way to really get to the other side is to go through it. And so these reminders are so timely, so important, and so helpful. So I'm just lit up. I'm really energized from this conversation.
I'm happy. And again, the diamond analogy is great. And businesses, as we all know, it's a form of creation. It's a form of birth. You're birthing something. And like, let's be real, the birthing experience, like there's 9 months of incubation, and then I've never given birth, but rumor has it's painful as hell and really messy. But you in the end get this very beautiful thing out of it. And so it's the same thing with business, and really anything that we're doing is part of. And even that analogy of birth, like I don't know why I'm saying the incubation period, when the baby is like in the womb, it's also in this like dark abyss essentially, right? But it's also this really beautiful abyss, and then it's born into the world. And so so many things that we create can sometimes feel like we're in the abyss, but that also might mean that we're exactly where it is that we're supposed to be. That's just the stage we're at, and we haven't yet like fully given birth or been birthed in whatever it is that we're creating.
Beautifully said. This hour has seriously flown by because the conversation has been so incredible. I cannot believe an hour has passed already. Goodness. Okay, so that being said, I would love to allow you the opportunity for any shameless plugs, anything you want to share before we kind of wrap up, where people can find you, what you're working on, any last tidbits.
Yes, thank you. And thank you so much for having me. This was very fun. In terms of where you can find me, you can follow me on Twitter, or I have my Ashford Park account in here as well. If you're interested in like ecotourism, co-creating, we're actually looking at some property next week in California. We're looking to kind of expand the park a little bit as well. So if you want to follow along for that. And then for other things, yeah, feel free if you're on Instagram. My handle is at Lana Dingwall. And then just in terms of like coaching or anything, or even just like having conversations, if you if you're if anything we talked about today kind of sparks something for you and you have questions, or you want to like riff on something, please feel free to shoot me a message. And then my kind of parting piece of feedback is just like you are always doing way better than you're giving yourself credit for, and to keep going because the world needs whatever it is that you feel you want to pursue and or create, because I truly do believe that our what inspires us, like our hopes and dreams, are premonitions, because like my dreams are not your dreams are not mine, and so because of that, I do believe that kind of what we what we feel pulled towards and or want to create or birth, again, even though it might look different, I strongly believe that those are actually like premonitions and seeds that have been planted into you, telling you what's possible for you, because all of us dream and want to build and create different things. So that just feels true to me. And so yeah, just do it, keep going, you're badass, and thank you for all that you bring into this world.
Likewise, friend, you are a badass. Thank you for all that you bring into the world. Sierra, thank you for bringing this guest on today. This is the first time connecting with you for me personally. And I'm really, it's been such a pleasure to get to listen to you and connect with you. And I'm definitely going to follow you on all your socials and would love to stay connected. Thank you for your time and for all the gems that you dropped and shared with us today.
This has been really awesome. It's so awesome that I completely forgot to check our little live chat. So if you're in our live Twitter space, like we have a chat where you can respond and leave notes. And I'm just seeing that Jana left a couple comments there. Hello, honey. She left one comment saying that she knows some really amazing human design readers. So please, if you need a human design reader to help you, Abby, please check out this comment and these suggestions from Jana. And then also she left a comment saying, how did we get to week 33? Girl, I was just, my husband was just asking me that. He was like, it's been 33 weeks of mindful business. And I'm like, I can't believe it either. Goodness, this was episode 33. Incredible. So next week we are skipping. I'm going to be at NFT NYC, which I'm so excited for. I have the pleasure of speaking on Friday afternoon about how Web 2 businesses can embrace NFTs and Web 3. And I'm just super stoked about that. I will be there between Tuesday and Sunday. So for quite a period of time, if anyone will be there and want to link up, please shoot me a message. So no podcast next week. But the following week, April 19th, episode 34, we're going to talk about spiritual retreats, which is really exciting. If you haven't seen yet, Abby and Jana are planning a spiritual retreat for next year. So we're going to talk all about that and just about retreats in general. I've never taken one, and I kind of feel like I need some tips to plan an enlightened escape. And, tips to plan an enlightened escape, I didn't think of that. ChatGPT thought of that as I was coming up with like notes. So I'm not even gonna take credit for that, because I was like, ooh, enlightened escape. I was like, that's kind of fire. So you mentioned ChatGPT and how you're using it to help your business thrive, and I am as well. Um, Last thing, episode 35 on April 26th, the final Wednesday of April. We're going to talk about accessible yoga poses. So over the weekend, I graduated yoga teacher training. I got my 200-hour certification after an 8-month-long training process, which I'm really excited to just like dive into yoga teacher training. So on April 26th, episode 35, we'll talk about accessible yoga poses, safe starting points for beginners and newbies. Thank you everyone for hanging out with us. Thank you to our special guests for all of your nuggets and gems, as Abby put it. I'm looking forward to our next episode of Mindful Business, and I'm looking forward to seeing everything you've been working on come to fruition, Lana. And you mentioned a California location. That is super exciting. So we might have to have you come back once that's up and running and really dive into Astrid Park. All right, y'all. Have a beautiful night. Sending out lots of good juju, and we'll see you next time.